Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the State of Research in Homeopathy. My name is Mark Land, President of the American Association of Homeopathic Pharmacists, and we welcome you today to this presentation. We have over 500 people joining us today for this presentation by Rachel, and we're looking forward to it. But before we do that, I realized this morning, looking over the list of registrants, that there are people joining us from a wide variety of within the homeopathic community, and not all of you may know who the American Association of Homeopathic Pharmacists is. The American Association of Homeopathic Pharmacists, or AAHP, as we like to say, is the trade association representing manufacturers and marketers of homeopathic medicines in the United States. We were founded in 1923, and many of our members date back to the founding of our trade association. Our principal work is to improve the environment for marketing of homeopathic medicines in the United States, and that involves a lot of work in education of our members, education of regulatory authorities, and legislative authorities. We do this work on a volunteer basis, and we have been doing it since 1923. On an educational front, we are offering webinars like we are today. Today, we're talking about the research in homeopathic medicines, but we offer a wide variety of webinars on a wide variety of topics throughout the year. For more information, you can reach us by the links that you see on your screen, or you can reach us at the aahp.org for more information. Today's event is being recorded, and you can access it from our website in a few days, or you can download it from our website. It will take a few days for it to happen. So today we're going to be talking with Rachel, or Rachel's going to be talking with us, and Rachel Roberts is the chief executive of the Homeopathic Research Institute based in the UK. It's a charity that's dedicated to promoting high-quality research in homeopathy at an international level, and its work's vital to everyone in the homeopathic community, facilitating new high-quality studies, challenging misinformation on homeopathy, on the homeopathy evidence base on a worldwide basis. The HRI is the only organization is doing what they're doing. Rachel, I've known Rachel for several years. She's incredibly enthusiastic and energetic, and she's been working in this area for actually now since 2010. HRI works as a nonprofit organization. They operate on donations. Your donations are welcome. The information is there at on your screen, www.hri-research.org/donate. Please consider making a donation today. A donation of $100 is small compared to the value that you're going to receive today. As I mentioned, you can watch it again. This video is being recorded, and you can watch it again, and you can access the video by the aahp.org/archive. So a little bit about Rachel. As I mentioned just a second ago, Rachel is the chief executive of the Homeopathic Research Institute based in the UK, dedicated to promoting high-quality research in homeopathy at the international level. They are the only organization doing that, and Rachel is the lead in that area. Rachel has a first-class honors degree in biological sciences from the University of Birmingham. She graduated from the College of Homeopathy in London in 1997 and was in private clinical practice until 2012. Rachel has lectured in both homeopathy and medical sciences at various colleges in the UK and overseas before moving into the field of homeopathic research. She held the post of research consultant for the Society of Homeopaths from 2008 to 2012 and was awarded an honorary fellowship in 2013 to acknowledge her contribution to homeopathy. Rachel joined HRI part-time in 2010 and has worked for the Institute full-time since 2012. In 2018, Rachel was awarded an honorary fellowship by the Faculty of Homeopathy in recognition of her work in the field of homeopathic research. By way of introduction of her talk, Rachel introduces it this way. Many in the homeopathy sector say there is loads of evidence that homeopathy works. Detractors say there is no evidence at all that homeopathy is anything more than the placebo effect. As is often the way, the reality is somewhere in between these extremes. In this presentation, we will look at the true status of the clinical evidence base for homeopathy, including both its strengths and weaknesses, as well as identifying where some of the frequently repeated myths surrounding this topic originate so that they can be firmly dispelled. So, join me in welcoming Rachel Roberts of the Homeopathic Research Institute.
So, thank you very, very much, Mark, for that introduction. Now I just have the hardest part, which is to make sure I share my screen properly. And hopefully we get to see my PowerPoints. So, hopefully this is going to work for us. That's looking good, fabulous. So yes, thank you, Mark, and thank you also to the AAHP for this invitation. It really is a fantastic opportunity to share some information on my favorite topic, which is the evidence base for homeopathy. So you've already learned a little bit about HRI, but if you're completely new to our organization, I was going to proudly tell you that we were founded in 2009 because we were very excited to have our 10th anniversary in 2019. But compared with AAHP, I realize we are the new kids on the block quite clearly. But what we've been doing for a little over 10 years is really trying to bring modern scientific rigor to this wonderful 200-year-old medicine that we all know so much about and care about so deeply. So yes, we are promoting new studies. We want new studies to be of the best quality possible, and we are busy trying to correct misinformation on homeopathy. So having been in this field for a little over 10 years, I was reflecting not that long ago on the fact that it's quite a strange situation, that over this period, I have seen the evidence base for homeopathy strengthening, for sure. And yet the debate around that evidence base is really more intense than ever. So what we seem to be seeing is actually a growing divergence between the actual status of the evidence and how that evidence is perceived by those outside of our sector. And this really hit me in the run-up to our conference in June 2019, because I knew we were just about to host 75 researchers from 26 countries looking at all these different types of research and reporting positive results from homeopathic medicines in everything from humans to animals to plants and so on. And yet at that very same time, I opened the newspaper and there it was, a headline: a lawsuit in the US to do with Walmart, basically around the issue of some claim that there is no evidence homeopathy works. So really, how do we explain this massive difference of perception? The huge myth that there is no evidence whatsoever that homeopathy works or that it's been shown to be placebo comes down to one single document. It really is quite astonishing that one document can have so much influence all the way around the world. And some of you will really be familiar with this, others won't be yet. This is known as the Australian Report, and it was published in 2015 by a very well-respected government research institute. So it looks really authoritative. And this study concluded that there are no health conditions for which there is reliable evidence homeopathy is effective. So a pretty damning conclusion. And of course, that triggered headlines all around the world saying homeopathy doesn't work. But then when you dig deep into this report, you rapidly find out that there are major problems with it. The first being that their whole result hinges on their own invented definition of what a reliable trial is. They said a trial had to have a minimum of 150 people in it and a perfect quality score on the JADAD scale of 5 out of 5, or similar on other quality rating scales. They looked at 176 studies. Only 5 of those met this made-up definition of reliable, so that is how it was very easy for them to conclude there is no reliable evidence homeopathy works. In the executive summary, they actually went even further. And of course, we know hardly anybody will read the 600-page document. They will just read the executive summary. And in there, they said, no, good quality, well-designed studies with enough participants for a meaningful result were positive. And that is completely untrue. I mean, I can prove that just in this presentation because we're going to look at some of these good quality positive studies. So that, if you like, is where they really, really overstepped, because that is categorically untrue, which means taxpayers' dollars were used to seriously mislead the public. And that has actually enabled the homeopathy sector for the last, well, the intervening period, really since 2016, to try and challenge this report legally and have it taken down. So that campaign has started to have real world effects, and we can see the impact coming through first in the August 2019. At that point, we had a real breakthrough, because one thing that was discovered during this investigation into this whole Australian report and how it had been put together was that the version they published in 2015 was not the first evidence review this team did. The first time they did it, they reached a draft report stage in 2012. And that contractor was Professor Karen Grimmer at the University of South Australia, a very prestigious author. And when she did the evidence review for NHMRC, she found there is encouraging evidence for the effectiveness of homeopathy in 5 medical conditions. So this is our first taste today of what the real status of the evidence base is before you start messing with it. 5 conditions with encouraging evidence back in 2012. That report was never published, it was buried. They did it all over again and published a second version in 2015. When we got this first report released, which was obviously quite a fantastic moment for the team, there was a covering statement with it from the current chief exec of NHMRC. And she actually chose that moment to speak out and say, contrary to some claims, the review they published in 2015 did not conclude that homeopathy was ineffective. So the first important point to take away today is that if anyone says there's no evidence or it's placebo and that's been proven, and you realize they're talking about this Australian report, you can say the chief exec herself has said that is not what they said. They never said homeopathy doesn't work. So the legal challenge that's been going on since 2016 to try and have this report taken down and try and hold NHMRC accountable for the damage that this report has done, this has been an ombudsman investigation in collaboration with Jerry Dendrinos in Australia from the Australian Homeopathic Association, working closely with HRI to do this legal challenge. Now, when we started this, we were told by the lawyer that it usually takes 6 to 18 months to do an ombudsman investigation. But she warned us, it's probably going to be the 18-month side of this because you are taking on the Australian government. There's a lot at stake here, so it's probably going to take 18 months. We have now gone over the 4-year mark. We will get to 5 years in August this year. So it has been a much more drawn out battle than we ever imagined, but we are still fighting it for sure. Now, another thing to be clear about is that when we finally get a verdict, it's not about whether they did or didn't do bad science. That is transparent. It's obvious to everybody who looks at this report that this is bad science. What the verdict is about is whether you really can hold a government institute to account when they do something wrong in this way. So that is what is going to be very interesting. Will we actually be able to achieve that result considering who we are up against? One thing that I think a lot of people don't quite understand though about this topic, even if they're familiar with that story so far, is that the homeopathy review was only one of a set of 16 natural therapy reviews that the Australian government did between 2014 and 2015. And what happened was the Department of Health were trying to decide whether people in Australia could claim reimbursement for basically complementary therapy treatment, either from government health insurance companies or even from private insurance companies, which I found very strange. I thought private companies could cover whatever they wanted, but apparently they can't. So they did this set of reviews specifically to say, is there any evidence of effectiveness for these complementary therapies? And therefore, should people be able to get reimbursement? All of them, I have to say, were scientifically appalling. The homeopathy one was the worst, but none of them were well done. They all came out negative, and on the basis of that, reimbursements were banned. So this is quite a shocking development at the time. Jerry Dendrinos really wanted to address this whole situation, not just the homeopathy story. So we worked together with Jerry to create the Your Health, Your Choice PR campaign, and that turned out to be incredibly successful. Jerry's hard work on the ground in Australia led to a change of position by the Australian government, because this campaign really raised awareness both of the poor science that had gone on here and also the patient's right to choose the treatment of their choice, which is actually bound up in the constitution of most countries. So the great result he achieved is that all of these reviews are now being done again, and the government has said when they've been done again, they will look at the results and review this reimbursement issue. So there is a lot riding on this. So that brings us to the sort of modern day story, which is that we are now in the throes of this redoing of all these reviews. So the official title is the Natural Therapy Reviews 2019 to 2020, which is because these were meant to be published by the end of 2020. But of course, because of the pandemic, the whole thing got slowed down. So they're still in progress at the moment. So the first thing to understand is that all these reviews, just because they're over 5 years old, they do need updating, they do need doing again anyway. So it's kind of a win-win for everybody. The complementary medicine sector want them done properly, so we want them done again. The Australian government actually knows they need to be updated anyway, so we can sort of kill two birds with one stone. So in terms of the homeopathy review, the existing report only contains studies up to January 2013, so it really is out of date now. So NHMRC right now are doing a new Australian report. This is in progress and they say it's due out late 2021, but considering the stage I know they are at with this process, I think it's more likely to be early 2022. So HRI has been providing official input to this process since August 2019 via the Department of Health. We are recognised as an interested stakeholder, I think is the phrase, and it's really been quite gratifying to see that all the efforts HRI has made with Jerry have seen tangible results, because they have said to us, this is verbatim, lessons have been learned. There will be no arbitrary criteria like minimum trial size and so on. We also know for sure that there are safeguards in place this time that were missing last time. The protocol will go through independent peer review. It will be published in advance. We've even got a homeopathy research expert on the committee. So these are things you would have expected last time, but they have been put in place this time. So it is very, very encouraging. And I think we can feel optimistic that this time the data is going to be handled fairly and objectively. But I have to say, I am not going to be complacent. And I was thinking about this the other day, and this is kind of how I feel when the topic of Australia comes up and anything happens in Australia. I'm going to, what are they doing? What's going on? It looks okay, but is it? What are they up to? I am kind of on high alert, to be honest, until this new review is across the line and I can see that everything's been done properly. Yeah, I'm not going to relax, I have to admit. So thinking about the latest work we did on this new review, the contribution we've made really brings us again back to the true status of the evidence base on homeopathy, because in October, the Australian government suddenly, without warning, put out a call for evidence for this review. So they said to the world, if there's any evidence you think we should be putting into this review, send it to us in 3 weeks. We literally had 3 weeks to do this, which was a little bit insane. So HRI reached out. We have some wonderful colleagues around the world who are experts in research as well. And what we did was we divided up the task and we all contributed different aspects according to our expertise. And we actually managed to put together a pretty good list in 3 weeks. We put together 446 primary studies which fit their inclusion criteria. So this is prevention studies, treatment studies, looking at efficacy, looking at effectiveness from all over the world. And that's not all the studies we've got. What I said to all these people is, please, do curate this list. Let's not send them any rubbish. Let's just send them what we think really are viable studies, really worth the reviewer's time. So this is quite a high caliber list of studies, all put into one spreadsheet in the exact format they requested, because they said if it wasn't, it might not be looked at. So we ticked all those boxes, sent it in, and my role was to write a little document about 5 pages long, where I just took that opportunity to say, do not do this, do not do that. I tried to anticipate anything NHMRC might try again this time. and try and, you know, make it less likely that that would happen by alerting the oversight committee to some of the errors of the past and some of the ways we were worried that the review might have problems in the future. So that's about all we can do for now, and we are giving input as and when requested until it comes to fruition. So having said there's really about 446 pretty decent studies out there, I'd just like to take a look at what we have within that clinical evidence base. So the first thing to share with you is this pie chart data. On the HRI website, we have homeopathy FAQs, which are the most popular part of our website, and that's addressing some of these really common myths that are out there around homeopathy. And the statement, "there is no scientific evidence homeopathy works," is of course our most popular page on the whole website, because people often want help with debunking that myth. So here, what you have is data provided by Robert Matthey, who is arguably the world expert on the clinical trial data on homeopathy. And he did an analysis of just the placebo-controlled trials. And when you look, this is just a sort of crude overview. If you look at the balance of the evidence base, it is remarkably similar to conventional medicine. This did actually surprise me the first time I saw it, because we have roughly the same proportions of positive, negative, and inconclusive studies. The thing to highlight, of course, immediately is that the volume of research in conventional medicine is massive compared with ours. So what you're looking at there is a sample of over 1,000 systematic reviews, each of which is going to contain many trials, whereas this is just 129 single trials we're talking about. So I have to highlight that point. But in terms of the actual weight of the evidence, in terms of direction, it is very similar. So if you are familiar with that page already on our site over the last, well, I think I did the FAQs in 2014, you'll be aware that that data was only updated in October last year. So what we did was commissioned Robert Matthey and said, look, we really want to update that pie chart from 2014 to 2019. So he did that analysis for us, and it was really great to see that in the last 5 years, the evidence base has improved in all categories. So I was delighted when I got the email to say, Rachel, the numbers are in, because you can never control the result of research. You can only commission it. And it was great. Positive trials increased, negative trials decreased, and inconclusive trials decreased. So that is where we are at in 2019. As you can see, we've now increased it to 77 medical conditions and 129 RCTs. So, I should just mention actually that, of course, that's now already out of date. Time marches on. So this month, Robert is going to do all the analysis for the 2020 studies. We'll get it updated again. And then we have an agreement now that he will update this for us on an annual basis. So it will remain current in future. So to dig a little deeper into the details of that data that Robert Matthey has been looking at for many years, I have to bring to your attention still the strongest single piece of evidence I believe we have that demonstrates that homeopathy is not a placebo effect. Robert did a rigorous systematic review of 22 placebo-controlled trials on individualized homeopathic treatment. So this is treatment, sort of gold standard care by a trained professional with a consultation and individualized prescription. And he found that homeopathic medicines, when they're prescribed during that individualized treatment process, they are 1.5 to 2 times more likely to have a beneficial effect than placebo. And this is a really rigorous study. He used the latest Cochrane methodology, the risk of bias assessment tool, which is still current today, published in a mainstream journal, and most importantly, the results are robust to sensitivity analysis. So that means it doesn't matter which of these 22 studies you look at, all of them or some of them, however you cut the data, you get the same positive results. So that's extremely important. Now, Robert's papers are fantastic academically, but they're not the easiest to read, especially if you're not very scientific. So Alex and I wrote a 2-pages of A4 plain language summary about this study that you can download from our website on the resources Research to Go page. One thing we've kept in that plain language summary, though, is this diagram, which I love. And we always call it the spine diagram, because whenever I look at this, that's all I see is vertebrae. But what Robert is showing here is that basically this is an unambiguously positive result. because, again, to put this in really simple terms, if the dot is to the right of the line, it means that that group of trials showed that homeopathy worked better than placebo. And of course, everything is to the right, so completely positive. And the top line is all 22 studies. And then what he did was he gradually removed studies according to their quality until the bottom line is just the creme de la creme. That is just the top 3 best ever of these studies. And what you see is that, in fact, the results get better as you take out the weaker studies. So this is important because another myth you might have heard, oh, if there's a positive study on homeopathy, it's because it's a weak trial, it's because it's a bad trial. If you do a high quality study, it's always negative. I've heard this so many times and it's completely untrue. And this study proves that fact. What you can see actually is that the dot has moved to the right, and the further it goes to the right, that means the stronger the clinical effect you are detecting from that treatment. So in fact, our best studies, which I think from memory are 2 by Jennifer Jacobs and 1 by Iris Bell on diarrhea, otitis media, and fibromyalgia. So all US, so well done the US researchers. These give us our strongest results. So to go in a slightly different direction, different type of study, what's sort of at the bottom of the evidence hierarchy, to use sort of old-fashioned thinking, are real-world effectiveness studies. And these, even though they're bottom of the hierarchy, I love them because to me, they're actually the most important. This is tracking real patients through real clinical situations and just seeing how they do when they are treated with homeopathy. And there are 5 studies that track patient outcomes in the public NHS hospitals in the UK. And what we saw was wonderfully consistent results, because that's what you want to see with repetition, hopefully the same kind of results coming through. We saw time and again clinical benefits and reduced use of conventional medication. The biggest of these was done at the Bristol Homeopathic Hospital in 2005, 6,500 patients. And what they saw was that 70% of those patients reported health improvement, 50% of them said it was a major improvement in their health. Now, I have to stress that these are patients, you only got sent to a homeopathic hospital in the UK in those days if you tried everything else and it didn't work. So we also have to factor that in. It's a good success anyway, but considering who these patients were, it's even more impressive. Other real-world effectiveness studies to draw your attention to were done in France. We call it the Ep3 Studies. I think different countries describe it slightly differently. And I've listed who did this because these are really high caliber research institutes who are behind this study. This was 8,500 patients involved. So we don't have repetition, but we have scale, which is very impressive. 825 doctors involved. And what this study found is that patients treated by GPs who trained in homeopathy got the same clinical outcomes as patients using conventional medicine alone, reduced use of conventional drugs, which of course could have had potential side effects. And really crucially, this study looked at, it's like strange wording, but no reduced chance of recovery. What that's about is, you've probably heard this myth that homeopaths and homeopathy is dangerous because we delay people getting proper treatment, real treatment. Complete myth. And again, this study proved that fact. It said, no, that just didn't happen in real life. And as we know, that doesn't happen. So if you would like further information on this part of the evidence base, I'd recommend you going to our essential evidence section of our website. You'll see this banner on our homepage. If you see that green question mark, that's essential evidence. Click on there and you can go straight through to the observational studies. And I just wanted to highlight this clip that is on there permanently from Stefan Baumgartner. He's a fabulous researcher in Switzerland. He's been in this field for decades. He's a physicist, but in fact, he has a remarkable knowledge of the entire evidence base of homeopathy. So you can always trust anything done by Stefan Baumgartner, and he just expresses the importance of this particular type of data really well in that little clip. So a step up, if you like, in the evidence hierarchy would be, the next level up is kind of pragmatic randomized trials. So we're getting a little bit more controlled in the setting, a little further from real life, but we can draw slightly firmer conclusions. But pragmatic, meaning that it's probably not blinded. What you're usually doing here is comparing one treatment against another, and you probably know which patients are getting each treatment. This is the work of Professor Michael Frass, who is another kind of heavyweight in the homeopathy research world. professor at the Medical University of Vienna. I mean, really high caliber institute and researcher. Now, I'm kind of breaking one of H.R.I.'s own rules here because we don't usually particularly focus on oncology, because I'm sure you can imagine in terms of the media and communications, those who are anti-homeopathy really like to try and twist things, and they try and kind of twist any mention of homeopathy having a role in cancer patients into something unethical. But I thought I do want to talk about this study because it's great, and the work that Michael Frass is doing is amazing. So I really wanted to share this with you. So what he did was a pragmatic trial looking at 410 patients who received standard care or standard care plus individualized homeopathy. So that's the point to stress with this study. There cannot be anything unethical about that because every patient had the usual oncology care they would have received. It's just that half of them also received homeopathy as well. Michael presented this as a keynote lecture at our conference in Malta in 2017. So I really recommend again that you listen to him telling you the story. It was 24 minutes. You can watch this either on our website or on YouTube. It's very easy to find. And I do think there is absolutely no substitute for hearing researchers talk about their study themselves, telling you their story. It really does make it come alive far more than I could ever do, or far more than when you read the published papers in the journal. What Michael found was that the global health status improved in the homeopathy group with a very nice statistical significance, and also subjective well-being improved more in the homeopathy group than the control group. So this was showing real clinical benefit to these cancer patients by having homeopathy as well as usual care. And I was very excited to see very, very recently, just last year, that Michael has progressed this work. What he's done now is he's taken the next step. He's gone to the top of the evidence hierarchy. He's done a placebo-controlled trial, focusing in on one particular cancer. And this is where he looked at advanced cases of non-small cell lung cancer. So this is a very aggressive cancer with, unfortunately, quite a limited prognosis. So anything that we could find, new tools to help these patients, there is a real clinical need here. And he did this really rigorous trial, double-blind, randomized, 3-arm, multi-center trial, again, looking at add-on individualized homeopathy. 150 patients, and to really spell this out, either you had standard care plus a consultation plus the homeopathic prescription, or you had standard care plus a homeopathic consultation plus a placebo, or you just had your usual care. I mention that because there's been some confusion. When this type of study is done before, some detractors have said, oh, it's just a consultation. The therapeutic effects of talking to a homeopath for an hour who's a really nice person. Well, no. This study design takes care of that issue. It actually cancels that effect out, which in a way is a shame because we know that is quite an important part of what we do. But this is designed specifically to isolate out the effect of the homeopathic prescription itself. And what Michael found is that, first of all, it's a very important point of its own. Integrated medicine worked here. You could integrate these two modalities successfully. And he specifically found that the homeopathy improved quality of life and median survival time in these patients. So really quite an impressive result. I thought if I'm going to go on to oncology, I might as well stay there. Another lovely study that I came across just the other day, very recently, is a double-blind randomized trial again, but this is a prevention study. So this was looking at non-individualized homeopathy this time, seeing if it could prevent a very common complication that you get straight after breast surgery, which is seroma. You get this fluid buildup in the breast, and it's really significant to the point where women have to have drains fitted. They can be very uncomfortable, even painful. They can lead to infection. And this fluid buildup really inhibits healing and slows down healing time. So again, great clinical need here. In this study, they looked at 55 patients who were having combined mastectomy and simultaneous breast reconstruction with implants. And they gave arnica and Bellis perennis or placebo. This was given from the point of surgery up until the point where the drain could be removed. So that's how they assessed whether the fluid buildup had been reduced by the remedies or not. And of course, I'm presenting it to you because it was successful. This was fantastic. Homeopathic treatment did reduce the seroma formation. What they found is in the women who were given homeopathy, they were able to remove the drains 18% sooner than in the placebo group. I also wanted to mention another aspect of this study, because this is another way that I've seen the evidence base strengthening over the time that I've been interested in this area. And this is a concept we call model validity. So in the old days, if you like, the priority was people were a bit obsessed with how good is this study in terms of the conventional scientific elements. Is it well designed? Is it randomized properly? Is it blinded properly? And so on, which is all important, but there wasn't enough consideration given, if you like, to the quality of the actual homeopathy being prescribed. Now, this study is the work, it was led by Professor Menachem Oberbaum. I think, again, many of you might know his work, another heavyweight at the University of Jerusalem, who is another very experienced doctor, experienced homeopathic, experienced researcher. So you can see that coming through in the quality of this work from the homeopathic point of view. So what I loved about this, he used the right remedies. This might sound obvious, but I think all of us have seen studies where arnica is used for cases of trauma where arnica is not the best remedy for that particular type of traumatic injury. Arnica is fantastic for bruising generally and trauma, but there are examples like this where there is a better remedy. And for trauma to the breast and the abdomen, as we know, Bellis is actually the #1 remedy. Potency was great. Of course, choice of potency varies from different prescribers, but I think most of us would agree a 30C is great for this kind of situation where you want frequent repetition. And the way the remedies were given was fantastic. So what I loved here was they reduced the frequency of the doses over time, just like you would in real life with good homeopathy training. And the remedies were tailored and adapted to the phases of the healing process. Again, this is beautiful homeopathy. This is exactly how it should be done. Faithful to homeopathic philosophy, but within a modern research study. So it's a lovely combination. Arnica is great right at the beginning, but only days 1 to 4. And then after that, they stopped the arnica so the Bellis could work on its own, uninterrupted in the system. So yeah, really, really beautiful piece of work. Now I wanted to change tack slightly because I gave myself the remit of only talking about clinical because of the time available. But I think we can just about consider veterinary research clinical. It's just patients are penguins in this case, not humans. And I wanted to share this with you because it's a lovely little study that was presented at our last conference in London by a Brazilian vet, just case studies, 10 case study of rescue penguins. And what we all learned from that presentation is that penguins, when they're in captivity, they do get healthcare issues just because they're in captivity. And one of them is that they start to get liver problems. So this vet just tried seeing what would happen if they gave Carduus marianus to these penguins instead of conventional treatment. Carduus marianus being the #1 most famous homeopathic remedy for liver disease, also known as milk thistle in the herbal world. And what she found is that the homeopathy was as effective as conventional medical treatment, but there were no side effects, it was cheaper, and it was easier to administer. So one of the reasons I've chosen this to share with you is because what struck me is if we're talking about the status of the evidence base generally, there is a really important geographical aspect to this because it all depends on the context of your country. So in Brazil, it's very, very different, certainly from the UK and from other countries, because in Brazil, homeopathy is kind of normal. It is fully integrated into society. It's taught in medical schools. It is funded as research in universities. It is provided in hospitals and through public health. So it really is part of life. So you see this really well reflected in the research because the research is different because they're asking different questions. They are not obsessed with it. Can you prove it's placebo or not? Or can you prove how much of this is placebo or not? They are looking at far more practical questions. In a zoo in Brazil, does homeopathy help our penguins more than the conventional drug? Is it safe? What does it cost? Can we give it easily? These are sort of really pragmatic, real world questions that they're looking at in Brazil. So I find this research really, really interesting. So I just wanted to take a step back and say, if I'm saying to you, we have all of this evidence, We might have tons of it, but we have a decent evidence base, we have good quality trials, it is absolutely definitely not consistent with placebo, then how do we have this homeopathy debate raging? And some authors some years ago put a really lovely paper out talking about this, and they coined this phrase, plausibility bias. What this means is, and this was my illustration that I came up with, is that if you have two people, perhaps that's me on the right, I'm looking at this evidence base, I'm going, yeah, this shows pretty clearly to me, this is not a placebo effect. How is there someone else, homeopathy detractor, looking at the same data and saying, this doesn't prove anything, there's nothing here, this isn't enough, this isn't good enough. And it all comes down to your starting position. It is well acknowledged that if you pick up a research paper and read it for the first time, how you perceive that evidence, how strong you believe it to be, how convincing it is, will depend on your opinion of that topic before you start, your starting position. And it's called plausibility bias because the main problem for some people is they just think homeopathy is impossible, implausible. So however much data we show them, there is this brick wall in front of them. They just can't kind of accept it. They can't take it in. And I remember showing Robert Mathis' systematic review that I talked about earlier to a professor called Voisier, head of a European agency, is a very important guy. And we ran him through this step by step. And he just said, there must be something wrong with it. There isn't. There must be. There isn't. It really was a brick wall. So how do we sort out this brick wall problem? More research is the only answer, I'm afraid. And I think there's two ways we could try and deal with this problem. The first is more clinical research. And the way I visualize this for myself is that each time you do good clinical research, it's like building a ladder that will gradually get higher and higher and eventually might get us right over this brick wall. Or you could do more fundamental research, because if plausibility bias is about this belief that it's impossible, if we could find out exactly how homeopathic medicines work, if we could find the mode of action, then I honestly believe we would be straight through that wall in one hit, because that's the problem for a lot of people. So in the end, what we probably have to do is both. Fundamental research, really cracking that issue of mode of action, is the holy grail, but that is a really tough research question. It's probably a Nobel Prize in it for some team one day who finally nail that question. So in the meantime, while the physicists and chemists are looking at that, we do need to progress the clinical research. And this is where I would say that we really do have a problem with our database, our data set. We do have a genuine weakness in the evidence base at the moment, which we should really be dealing with. And that is that the evidence is far too scattered. So we have roughly 221 randomized controlled trials looking at treatment, not prevention, treatment only. And that's comparing with placebo or other types of controls conducted up to 2019. But they cover 115 different medical conditions. So that is less than 2 trials per condition, and that is where the problem lies. So this is the result of part of this 5-year update that Robert's just done for us. And the sad thing is, the slide I had for the last 5 years also said average less than 2 trials per condition. So even though more research has been done in the last 5 years, we have not improved in that one area. So what we're really trying to say to people is, can the research community be a little more focused in future? Can we really try and be smart here and target just a few clinical areas and start replicating existing positive studies? Can we start building evidence base in these areas that Professor Grimmer described as encouraging? We might say are promising. Let's build those data sets so that we get to the point where that ladder goes right up over the wall. And we could really use our brains here to decide which conditions are worthy of this focused attention. We know there are areas where we need alternatives to existing treatments, either because they're not doing enough for patients, or there's some other issue like side effects or antimicrobial resistance and so on, where everybody's agreeing we could do with some new ways of treating patients. But to be fair, if I'm saying that we do have a bit of a problem with lack of replications and building data in certain named conditions, this replication crisis is not unique to homeopathy. So I do think if anybody has a go at you about this, said, well, this is a great study, but it hasn't been replicated, so it doesn't count. I've heard that one. That's really a little bit unfair, because this is a problem that goes right across conventional medical research. And it was brought to kind of world attention in 2005 by a very famous study by a bit of a legend in the evidence-based medicine world based in Stanford. He looked at 49 studies that were really huge. You know, they've been cited more than 1,000 times by other researchers. So these were sort of seminal studies. And only 20 of those had been replicated successfully, which is surprisingly low. Out of the other studies, 7 had been replicated, but when another researcher tried to do it again, the effects they found were not as strong. 7 were actually completely contradicted. So this is a concept now known as medical reversal, where another team does the study with a perhaps more modern technique, they do it sort of bigger and better, and actually get the opposite result. And for 11 of them, there was no replication whatsoever. So this is a problem for us, but not unique to homeopathy. And one of the last things I wanted to say about our evidence base today is, you know, while we're waiting for the physicochemists to figure out how the medicines work, and while we are spending years doing more really good clinical studies, I think we need something to use now. You know, these conversations are being had right now with decision makers. And what we've found at HRI is one of the best ways to kind of challenge plausibility bias is actually by exposing people to some of our basic research. Now, that was too much for me to go into today as well as the clinical, so another topic for another day. But again, on our website, you'll find these famous studies. We know that homeopathic thyroxine changes the rate of metamorphosis of tadpoles into frogs. We know that potentized histamine changes degranulation rates in white blood cells. And we know that the duckweed experiments done by Stefan Baumgartner's team in Switzerland show that you can change the growth rates of plants with homeopathic medicine. So for a lot of people, when you just tell them that, they are pretty amazed. They just didn't know that we have tested these remedies in these experimental settings and that we can see biological effects very clearly. So to conclude, there is good quality scientific evidence showing homeopathy works. The existing data is not consistent with homeopathy being a placebo effect. All the negative claims are based on one unscientific, inaccurate report that is under investigation, and more research is needed to explore the full potential homeopathy could play in integrated healthcare. However, past my conclusion point, I do want to just have 2 more slides, because I would not be doing my job if I didn't just tell you a tiny bit about what HRI has in store for the next 18 months. The FAQs I mentioned, these are our most popular resource, and they have been translated now into 12 languages, which has been quite an undertaking. Now, as I said, they were written in 2014. So this year is the year we're going to take a deep breath and we want to overhaul these FAQs and bring them up to date. It's going to take a little time because I really want to do a thorough job on those. And then, of course, we'll have to have them retranslated into all 12 languages. So it's not going to be quick, but we are making that a high priority for HRI's output this year. And the other thing a lot of people are asking me about is, when is the next HRI conference? Those of you who know, we do these every other year. June 2021 should have been our year, but because of the pandemic, like many people, we had to postpone. So I can tell you we are definitely doing our next conference in June 2022, but unbelievably to me, we don't yet have a confirmed venue and date because I haven't been allowed to leave the UK since last August. And I'm not prepared to sign a deal with a hotel and host an international conference unless I've been to that hotel myself and checked every single detail. So we're watching the travel advice every single day. And the moment they open the border, I'm going to be on a plane to the hotels. We've got a short list of hotels and I'm going to go there and find us a venue. So hopefully we'll be able to announce the date and the venue very soon, but it is going to happen. That's everything from me. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thought you very much, Rachel. I encountered a lot of this information about maybe 9 months ago in another presentation and thought that it would be a good opportunity for this community here in the United States to hear what you have to say. I think that everyone can see from Rachel's presentation that the work that she's doing is vital. She may be the only organization in the world that's working in this manner in terms of analyzing and assimilating the research information in homeopathy, and but really providing an objective analysis of the data that leads to and points to directions where we can strengthen the evidence base in a meaningful way, both clinically as well as all of the other benefits that come from well-performed and dedicated clinical research on homeopathic products. And it will be available for review at future dates. Give us a couple of days to get it posted to our website. We are looking forward to that as well. I've got 16 Q&A chats and three questions in the Q&A. Let me just pull a few up. Here's a question. I don't know, I hope this doesn't take us down a rat hole, Rachel, but I'll ask it anyway. There's a question regarding, based on this, how did homeopathy lose reimbursement in the UK NHS system?
Oh yeah, that was a fun one. It is quite shocking because we got quite involved in that challenge, and it was interesting because I went to meet with the NHS when they were making this decision with many other people, and actually sat and took them through the studies, those hospital studies done in the NHS, and said, look, this shows it works, it's cheap, it benefits people who can't be helped with something else. If you take this away, how are you going to treat these people? And what was really shocking is the amount that was spent per year on the homeopathic medicines at that time, from their own figures, was £92,000 a year for the entire country, for the entire NHS, out of billions on drugs. You know, it was really, really crazy. So it was one of those situations where common sense did not prevail. Evidence made no difference. It was definitely a political decision that had no basis on science or fact or common sense. And that's the only thing you can say. I can't explain it. There is just a really anti-homeopathy culture in the UK, and it's very, very frustrating. So yeah.
Thank you. This is a question, actually, it's come to my mind as I dig deeper into the research of homeopathy. Where is homeopathic research into homeopathy coming from today? What geography, what type of a researcher? Is it coming from clinicians? Is it coming from other scientists? Where is it originating from?
So as you've seen, the Austrian group are doing very, very well. They seem to be solid and they keep delivering, which is really nice. We're seeing clinical research coming from Austria. We're seeing veterinary research coming from Austria. We're seeing clinical and veterinary from Brazil. We're seeing clinical from Israel, which you've seen. Some of the basic research is a little different. We're seeing experimental studies coming from Bulgaria, from Iran, and of course, India. You know, you can't mention research without mentioning India. What's been really wonderful to see, there's always been quantity coming out of India, but what we've seen in the last few years is a real step up in quality. And that is not by accident. That's been an active collaboration. I have to credit Rajman Chanda, who was the former director of CCRH, for those of you who know the organization. He really actively sought international collaboration. So many of us worked with the Indian research community to see, right, how can we share expertise here to really try and make this work sort of translate to a wider audience and be more widely accepted. And you can see that coming through now. And some of the latest papers and the abstracts, even the way they're written up, is really streets ahead of how it used to be. So that's been a really massive development.
Thank you. You had put up the slide that showed the different homeopathic organizations around the world that were solicited by the Australian government to give data in support of their current review of homeopathic research. I noticed that there's no one from North America. There's no organization from North America represented. What do you have to say about that?
That's my fault. Hand up. Okay, so the call for evidence was just a public consultation. So literally anyone in the world could have sent anything in. I knew when that happened, obviously, because I was told immediately. And when I saw I had 3 weeks to get it together, to be honest, I just went to the list of people I thought could deliver prevention studies, efficacy studies, effectiveness studies, European language studies, Indian journal studies, and just went bang, bang, bang. So I put that coalition together. So apologies to US researchers. I will remember you in future. I certainly didn't mean to keep anyone out of the loop on that. It was a bit of a speed of working with people I've worked with for many years. And one of the things I've actually liked is that I would say it's only in the last year to 18 months I've started, and HRI has started to work more and more with the US, which is lovely because these collaborations take time to grow, these relationships take time to grow, don't they, to trust each other and work on things at this level. Because what I really kind of was moved by was that what I asked of these people, they're all super busy, and the time frame, everyone went, how long, Rachel? And they gave me unpublished data. Now, that for a researcher, as you know, that's your bread and butter, and they trusted me with it. And I said, I promise you, it will not be seen by anyone except the Australian government. It will go straight there to that research team and nowhere else. So that's why we had to have these, work with people I know for a long time. But in future, let me know who's the best person to contact to get the US involved.
Thank you. Here's a question, it kind of dovetails to the earlier question, where in terms of where research is originating from, but this is a little bit more precise in terms of who is subsidizing research in homeopathy right now? What types of organizations? That's
a good point. I would say, sadly, it still often has to be supported by charities or by industry, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I like industry supporting research, they really should. But of course, what we would like to see is more public funding. I mean, until the NIH, for example, in America, start putting real meaningful funds into this, how can it ever really fulfill its potential in the US? So that is what we are still not seeing, if you like. And in the UK, there was a study quite some time ago, but I'm sure it has not changed, that said the amount of funding going to complementary medicine in total, the whole of complementary medicine research, was something like 0.085% of the research budget. I mean, nominal. However, what you do see is a lot more, of course, in Germany and in Switzerland and in Austria, we've already mentioned, but that central group of researchers there, they are getting more support. You get more public funding of research in Germany. You get Stiftungs. These are charitable foundations who put significant funds in this direction because they really value homeopathy. And Switzerland, of course, I call it it's the dream world for me, because in Switzerland, again, homeopathy is so widely accepted that it is not considered a difficult topic to research. So we do have meaningful amounts of funding going into places like the University of Bern and so
on. Different facet. We have 200 and I think you had 222 studies in 117 different therapeutic areas. What is driving the decision regarding the therapeutic area? Is it someone's individual interest? We see a very great, that dispersion just needs to be understood, I think.
Such a good point. So I feel like the problem is homeopathy is too good, right? We know it can do almost anything. There's rarely a patient who couldn't benefit in some way. Even if it's only alongside some other treatment, it can help in some way. So the very fact that there's such a broad application of homeopathy means that a certain researcher, depending on their personal experience sometimes of homeopathy, they have an interest in a particular area, or they've read some historical cases where perhaps it was great for pneumonia or something, and they want to do research on pneumonia for the first time ever. So we have also a culture, I think, of homeopathy attracting very free-thinking people and innovative people. So they want to do something innovative. So they want to do something new. So there's kind of not an interest, if you like, in replicating somebody else's study from 10 years ago. It's not so exciting for the researcher, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I think there's an element of that, which is totally natural in all forms of research. But what we are certainly working hard to do is to talk more and more with all the other experts in homeopathy around the world to start to collaborate, even if it's just conversations about what are you guys up to? What are you guys up to? And just start to share as much as confidentiality allows, so that we don't waste time, you know, either tripping over each other doing exactly the same study in a way that's not a useful replication. Maybe two people are doing the same systematic review. This has happened and you didn't know. So we're trying to collaborate more openly amongst ourselves so that the limited resource we do have can be deployed as effectively as possible to maximize, again, the output and really look at the common good. And what's been exciting to see is over the last couple of years, we've really seen that happening more and more. And that's somewhere where HRI, we really feel is a very important part of what we do, because we can sometimes bring people together who wouldn't normally work together, because people do know we only have one agenda, and that's getting good research done. You know, we're not about anything else. So it kind of simplifies things sometimes. And what we're really trying to do at the moment is get people at that level talking to each other to try to get a consensus on what do we think the hotspot topics are. Where do we think we should start aiming in future? So again, that doesn't happen overnight, but it is, I can tell you, it is absolutely, definitely in progress at the moment.
It's good to hear. We probably have a lot of practitioners on this call, and maybe some are interested in research. So question comes, what are the, you know, if you had to give us the, you know, the 5 top criteria for developing a study, what are the must-haves in the protocol? I'm just clinical medicine I'm talking about.
So yeah, first of all, I would say don't try and do a study on something where, you know, homeopathy is good, but conventional medicine is already good. You know, if we've already got a really good conventional medical treatment option, then it's not really, you know, there's not so much of a clinical need, and you are automatically going to be going up ahead against allopathic medicine, right? So it doesn't seem a sensible place to go. It's better to pick a medical condition where there's something of a limitation in the existing treatment option, because it's far easier to get ethical approval, because the clinical need can be accepted, right? Even if you're not a fan of homeopathy, you can say, okay, giving Ritalin to children, it's amphetamine based, it may not be great, perhaps we could look for something else. So I think picking the topic in terms of clinical need and avoiding a direct head-to-head with conventional medicine is probably paramount, actually. Then, of course, I would say pick a condition that there's already some evidence. People have come to us for funding and they say, I want to do this study. And I said, if you've got any evidence, homeopathy actually works for that. Oh, I had a really good case once. You need to be building it on some kind of data set already, some really strong premise that this works. And then in terms of the actual protocol itself, what we would say, so something we've moved away from over 10 years is, I would say, don't try and do research unless you are a trained researcher. I know that sounds perhaps obvious, but we get really enthusiastic homeopaths who say, I want to do a trial, and they think it's as simple as splitting people into 2 groups, you know, and giving them different things. And it really isn't. I think we have to respect the discipline of research as highly as we do the discipline of being a practitioner. So if you really want to get involved in research, you have to go and train. At least go and do, you know, a master's, part-time, get some skills, and then build your research team so that you have expertise around you. You have your statistician, you have your conventional medics involved, and so on, and you have this robust team. So I think that's 3 things already. But yes, can't remember how many you asked for, but those are probably the big ones actually before you even get off the ground.
Last question, because we are the American Association of Homeopathic Pharmacists. With respect to replication, is that an opportunity for pharmaceutical firms to mine the database of research as looking for potential targets for replication to, say, prove their own products or prove in a therapeutic area of interest to them?
Absolutely. I think one thing we've been thinking about a lot recently is that I don't think we've maximized the potential of the data we already have. I think you're absolutely spot on with that. I think more could be done, again, to go back through, and again, with increased sharing of data. I know that's not always possible, but as much as we possibly can go, do you know what? Several different companies have all looked at that and it's all looking good. and really, yeah, try and build on those areas. And I think you're right that it's in the benefit of patients, of course, but it's not a bad thing for it to be for the benefit of industry. I have no problem with that.
I think that we are a bit over our time at the moment. There were a number of questions that I wasn't able to get to. I tried to summarize a few questions into one to answer as many as I could. But for those who didn't hear an answer to your question, we will do our best to get a response to you. But I want to just reiterate a little bit of a commercial for announcement for HRI. As I had mentioned, and maybe you can put the contact information up on the screen, Kate, that HRI is unique in what they are doing. I think we see from what Rachel has presented and the concepts that she has exposed to us in terms of the work that HRI is doing, is that they are a unique and very thoughtful organization. Their work has been tremendous in terms of not only defending homeopathy, but I think leading a way forward. If you haven't made hri-research.org a link on your computer, do it now. It's a wonderful place to find all sorts of information about research, learn new things, learn new directions, bookmark it, visit it from time to time, keep yourself up to date, use it as a mechanism to engage with the research community in general, because the work that Rachel and her team is doing to assimilate research from around the globe is really important, and it makes your work much easier. So that work doesn't get done, as I had mentioned earlier, free of charge. So please consider a donation to hri-research.org/donate. It's there on the screen. It's not hard to remember. If you can't remember that, just HRI, Homeopathic Research Institute, will get you to their website on a plain old Google search. Thank you again, Rachel, for your presentation today. I know it's late in the UK, and we certainly appreciate the personal effort that you make to present to us today, but also appreciate everything that you're doing for homeopathy and homeopathic research. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks so much.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. That concludes our presentation for this afternoon.